Elon is obsessed with Mars, that's a fact, but he also has been busy here on Earth, in Antarctica. It turns out that the South Pole holds more mysteries than anyone could have imagined. And in a surprising turn of events, the Tesla boss and a couple of other scientists have spotted a huge mysterious object moving across the icy continent. What exactly is this object? And why on earth is it in Antarctica? Let's find out. The first time the mysterious object was spotted, nobody thought much of it. It was incredibly large, and half of it was covered in ice. So almost anyone concluded it was an iceberg. But when the object began moving and the ice came off, it became clear that it was something else. So scientists immediately got to work on it. Research was conducted, and the scientists found that their perception had changed. More importantly, they all had different theories of what the object really was. Now, this isn't the first time strange objects have been found on the continent. Back in 2022, scientists uncovered an entire ecosystem beneath Antarctica's icy ground. The scientists had been studying the continent when they stumbled upon an unusual dent in the satellite image of the Larsen ice shelf. Some things were lurking beneath the ice sheet, so they decided to investigate by drilling a hole in the ice to see what had caused the dent. What they encountered was beyond incredible. Beneath their feet, beneath all that ice, was a vast ecosystem of microorganisms. The massive subterranean habitat was about 1,640 feet, or 500 meters below the surface, and it was filled with thousands of tiny crustaceans known as amphipods. A little while after this shocking discovery, scientists discovered phytoplankton blooms living beneath the surface of the polar region. Now, this was the one that really shook them, because before then, scientists were pretty certain phytoplanktons couldn't survive in those conditions. The environment was incredibly harsh, and there wasn't enough sunlight for the phytoplankton to create enough energy to survive. But after the discovery, scientists found that it was possible for algae to survive with as little as 1% of the light available on the surface. Now, life in Antarctica might not be surprising to those familiar with the icy terrain, but there have been other discoveries that have pushed the boundaries of what should be considered normal or even possible. Some years ago, scientists on an icebreaker ship stumbled on a horde of about 60 million icefish nests on the floor bed of the Weddell Sea in Antarctica. The nests had about 10 inches between them, and they covered an area of around 93 square kilometers. The most intriguing part was that each nest had a parent fish guarding it closely. As impressive as this sounds, it doesn't even come close to the Gomburtsev Mountains. On the surface, there's nothing exciting about finding mountains in Antarctica, but that's because the mountains are not on the surface. Named after the Russian scientist Grigory A. Gomburtsev, an entire range of these big boys were found about 2,000 to 4,000 kilometers beneath ground level, underneath the ice sheets. These mountains stretched as wide as 1,200 kilometers and were about 3,000 meters tall, which is about one-third the height of Everest. Despite the fact that these discoveries date as far back as 1958, the mountains have not physically been seen. Everything we know about the underground mountain range was obtained from research done by scientists using radars. The magnetic and gravitational readings from these radars have helped them study the mountains all the way to the base. But the most intriguing part is that no one can say how it got formed or why it's still existing, because there are no signs of it shifting on the tectonic plate. Another fascinating discovery is the presence of a dry valley in Antarctica. As difficult as it might be to believe, there is a desert in Antarctica. It might account for only 0.2% of the continent's surface area, but it is incredibly massive. Rainfall is incredibly sparse there, and it even has massive sand dunes as high as 70 meters. The most interesting part is that these dunes move on an average of 1.5 meters per year. Scientists believe that this movement is caused by climate change, because when the atmosphere heats up, the ice melts and the dunes that are on them slip away. But once again, it gets weirder. Antarctica also features a river. It might begin to sound ridiculous at this point, but just like the Gomburtsev Mountains, this river lies beneath Antarctica's ice sheets. Scientists made this discovery with the aid of ice-penetrating radar equipment that was mounted on aircrafts. At first, they thought they had found 4 different underground rivers that flowed independently of one another, but upon closer inspection, it turned out to be just one massive river. The river is said to be about 300 miles long, which is much longer than the Thames in England, and is probably why climate activists are so worked up, because if that entire region melted due to climate change, the global sea levels could rise by 14 feet, and that could lead to catastrophic consequences. But that's not even the scariest discovery from the ice continent. Antarctica's Thwaites Glacier, popularly known as the Doomsday Glacier, is currently in danger. Research revealed that the glacier is barely attached to its seabed below. Think of it as an upside-down wrecking ball hanging by a thread. Because the truth is, the moment it detaches completely, there would be rapid movement that could increase the rate of ice loss across the continent and subsequently submerge many parts of the world. A map of the seafloor surrounding the glacier revealed several parallel grooves that were left behind the last time the glacier moved a bit. The movement is probably centuries old, but scientists believe the glacier is still moving whether or not we notice. Finally, at the extreme end of these Antarctic discoveries lies a giant hole the size of Ireland. Holes like these are called polynia, but this one is fairly recent. It opened up in 2017, but today already has a span of 78,000 square kilometers. Scientists have tried to figure out what exactly caused this specific polynia. Some point to warm water pushed up by the ocean currents which melt the surface, but the widely accepted theory is that marine mammals beneath the ice floors might have created the openings themselves in order to breathe. But wait, what does all of this have to do with the mysterious floating object that Elon Musk and other scientists found? Like we established earlier, scientists initially thought it was an iceberg. That was the easiest answer because Antarctica is mostly ice. What might have further solidified the theory is the fact that recently the world's largest iceberg, A76A, which was initially in Antarctica, broke away from the Elon ice shelf. This iceberg is around 84 miles or 125 kilometers long and 16 miles or 26 kilometers wide. It drifted across Antarctica and towards the Drake Passage, which is a turbulent stretch of water in the Southern Ocean. On paper, the iceberg theory makes sense, and scientists would have gone along with it if they hadn't given the object a closer look. On its surface, they found skid marks and grooves that were difficult to explain. They also noticed that it wasn't translucent like most icebergs often are. It sported a unique shade of black. Unsurprisingly, this new discovery inspired other theories, but the most interesting was a military craft. For some, this might come off as a conspiracy theory, but it isn't. If you are remotely familiar with the geopolitical scene, that you thought global superpowers have a habit of using remote locations to test out their new technologies. Countless classified operations are carried out by government agencies around the world, and Antarctica would have been a perfect candidate for their experiments if not for one big issue. Back in the 23rd of June 1961, the world's most powerful countries chose to sign an agreement called the Antarctic Treaty. By signing that treaty, they collectively ceded the right to station their military presence in Antarctica, unless it was for scientific research purposes. Funnily enough, it was the US that was the aggressor. They were the ones who triggered the need for the treaty. After the Second World War, the US tried to establish a claim on the continent. They even carried out Operation High Jump, a military expeditionary force in Antarctica. The operation consisted of 4,700 men and several ships. The plan was to train the military personnel to survive an extreme cold and also test several materials. This move angered several other countries that were also considering using Antarctica for military operations. After several back and forths, the treaty was signed by 12 countries: Australia, Argentina, Belgium, Chile, France, Japan, New Zealand, Norway, South Africa, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Although it can be argued that with or without the treaty, these countries eventually do what they want when they want, scientists decided to consider other viable options, and it was at this point that they stumbled on one of the most feasible explanations for the moving object. The object was a meteorite. Meteorites are fragments that chip off asteroids. Asteroids, on the other hand, are small rocky bodies that orbit the sun. A large number of these can be found between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter. But since Mars is close to Earth, asteroids sometimes crash into the planet. On average, asteroids with a 1-kilometer diameter crash into the Earth every 500,000 years. Meanwhile, larger asteroids with a diameter of 5 kilometers crash into Earth once every 20 million years. The most recent asteroid explosion that happened over Antarctica occurred about 430,000 years ago. According to reports, the asteroid should have crashed on the surface of Antarctica, but it exploded in the sky in what is now known as an airburst. The airburst led to several shrapnels of space rock covering the surface beneath the explosion. It's important to note that airbursts are more destructive than a regular asteroid crash because they can destroy a very large surface area, while an asteroid just affects the area it lands on. Now, since Antarctica has not been properly rated by humans in the past 500,000 years, the airburst meteorites from the asteroid were mostly untouched. And if this theory holds up, this might be the first of many others. The object's strange color was probably the result of a couple of factors. The asteroid that exploded over Antarctica was 150 meters wide, but when it exploded, it happened very close to the surface. This led the nickel and magnesium-rich fragments to react with the Antarctic ice, and this reaction was what caused the strange color of the meteorites. For now, scientists have settled with this theory. They are considering that the fact it went undetected for so long was because of the ice that covered it, and the reason it had its strange marking was because of its climate, and the fact that it had stayed underwater for that long. However, there are still some that have expressed their doubts. Understandably, not everyone is convinced, but the reality is, the simplest theory is often the most accurate. It is kind of like how scientists once thought they had discovered an actual pyramid in Antarctica, only to find that it was something else entirely. The pyramid was actually a mountain that had been worn down by thousands of years of erosion. The truth will eventually be established when adequate research has been done. The barren continent, Antarctica, holds many secrets, and for that reason, it's become the bedrock for scientific research. And several experts, including Elon Musk, have been busy trying to unravel its mysteries. Quite recently, the truth behind the continent was discovered. And from what the SpaceX CEO has revealed, the new discovery defies everything anyone knows about this large tract of ice-cold land. So, what latest detail has Musk and his legion of scientists found out about Antarctica? Antarctica is an incredibly harsh and isolated ice desert, but it also happens to lie on the southernmost pole of the Earth while being our fifth largest continent. Its mysterious nature is the reason why research settlements have chosen to populate it. On average, and despite the sudden disappearance of some people, about 1,000 to 5,000 people can be found on the continent at any given time. For a continent larger than Europe to be almost inhabitable, scientists have been convinced for a long time that it holds a lot of secrets. So, it isn't surprising that Elon Musk has made his way into the conversation. The science enthusiast lives for mysteries and achieving the impossible. His work in the largely uncharted industry of space exploration, Mars specifically, has exhibited his curiosity for the unknown. And what's more mysterious than a large ice continent? Elon enjoys being a part of the conversation, and considering how little he knew of the continent in the past, the serial entrepreneur invested in months and months of research that led to several shocking discoveries. However, the most recent discovery, and the one that we'll be covering in this video, is wrapped in a very puzzling question about the continent's past. Was Antarctica always an icy desert? It all started when some scientists discovered a million-year-old DNA sample on the continent. This DNA was discovered in the Scotia Sea, located just north of the continent. The ancient genetic material discovered was extracted from the depths of about 584 feet beneath the seafloor. And although it's not known for a fact, scientists mentioned that it might have originated from a group of phytoplanktons known as diatoms. This DNA is so old that it's now the oldest marine DNA found from seafloor sediment. Despite knowing nothing much about the DNA yet, it was an eye-opener as it became the basis of the idea that Antarctica had undergone several transformations to become what it is today. After the DNA was discovered, scientists knew there was more evidence to find, so a group of them set out to uncover more proof that the continent had been more habitable in the distant past and had undergone a series of radical changes. The mission involved finding fossils of plants or animals that had existed millions of years back. Despite the difficulty of reaching the continent, the scientists were willing to give it their all. To reach the specific part of the continent relevant for the research, they flew to South America. And they endured a 5-day rough ride through one of Earth's deadliest seas, the Drake Passage. Upon getting to the shore, they ventured out to James Ross Island to begin their hunting. And after weeks of hunting and systematically sorting through rocks, they hit the jackpot. The scientists found tons of fossils from marine creatures, dinosaurs, and birds that had lived as far back as the late Cretaceous period, which is about 71 million years ago. Besides the large animals, they also discovered the fossilized forewings of a beetle species that lived about 20 million years ago. But the most extraordinary was the discovery of 50-million-year-old sperm cells on the egg case of a long-extinct species of worm. These discoveries changed everything because even though they still had to carry out more analysis on the fossils, the scientists began to settle in with a new theory. They were beginning to believe that the icy desert was once a tropical rainforest with lush vegetation and tropical trees. Because what other theory could explain the presence of dinosaurs and bird remains on the continent? Even if there were doubts initially, more discoveries down the line solidified their stance. And one of them was the discovery of an enormous icefish breeding colony. In 2021, some scientists discovered the largest known fish breeding colony in the Antarctic Weddell Sea. The colony, which contained 60 million nests, had been found at over 400 meters below sea level by the Filchner ice shelf of the sea. And through the towed camera system used, the scientists were able to deduce that the colony was created by a species of icefish known as Neopagetopsis ainoa. The discovery of the colony was an indication that life used to exist on the planet before it was frozen. Further proof was the discovery of sponges beneath the ice of the continent. In 2021, some geologists were drilling through the ice and they suddenly hit a rock. None of them noticed anything until a scientist saw the video that had been made during the process. The scientists discovered sponge organisms on the rock. It was strange enough that there were sponges thriving beneath the ice sheets, but what was even stranger was the reality of other organisms living on the same rock. But there were even stranger surprises ahead because in June of 2022, some scientists noticed a groove in the Larsen ice shelf in Antarctica. And due to previous discoveries, they guessed that a river was running beneath the ice. So to confirm, they drilled through the ice just like they had done for years, and instead of finding a river with just maybe an organism or two, they discovered an entire ecosystem. The organisms found were shrimp-like crustaceans swimming at about 1,600 feet below the ice. The scientists decided not to disturb the ecosystem, so they chose to study it from afar. But organisms weren't the only things buried beneath the ice on the continent. In a recent discovery, scientists discovered a mountain range which was about 1,200 kilometers wide and had a height of 3,000 meters, 1/3 of Mount Everest's height. Each inch of it was covered in ice, and the discovery had been made because of the abnormal gravity fluctuations that had been discovered on passing that region. To date, no one has seen the mountain physically, but the gravitational and magnetic readings indicate that it's still there. For something that large to be completely buried beneath the ice, it showed that once it was removed, a lot of secrets would be uncovered. But since it was a dangerous affair to attempt removing ice sheets, they decided to do it virtually. The researchers used data from the European Space Agency on the full gravity of the Earth to measure the changes that had occurred in the continent. With the help of the data obtained from the agency and other satellites, they were able to virtually remove the ice from Antarctica, and that allowed them to get a view of the bedrock beneath the ice. And there they saw proof of the continent's past when it was still part of the supercontinent Gondwana. Gondwana existed about 180 million years ago and was made up of current southern hemisphere continents. Although the virtual removal of the ice was just a simulation, it was enough to show what Antarctica used to be like. With all those discoveries as proof, there was no doubt that they were on the right track. But it also led to another question: what caused the changes? Evolution has indeed occurred over the years, and even the part of Earth we currently live in has undergone some major changes. But a change as drastic as the one which occurred in Antarctica must have been caused by something very huge, and for this, scientists came up with two theories. The first theory was that ice formed as a result of global climate change. According to scientists, in the periods before the Cenozoic era, Antarctica was much warmer and had diverse vegetation. The average temperature of the continent ranged from 30 to 51 degrees Fahrenheit, and dinosaurs comfortably lived on the continent because, why not? Even after the asteroids killed off all the dinosaurs and other mammals, the continent remained unfrozen. But it all changed about 34 million years ago when global temperatures dropped an average of 5 degrees Celsius, and that led to the freezing of the continent. Despite how it seems, the temperature change has not been drastic. It all began about 66 million years ago, in the Cenozoic era. The carbon dioxide level declined steadily during that period, and according to scientists, once the CO2 levels dropped below the critical level, the temperature became cooler. And this led to the formation of ice sheets and glaciers that froze up the continent. As valid as this theory seemed, there was no proof to back it up, so they came up with a second theory, which was the continent freezing up due to dramatic changes in ocean circulation patterns. According to the theory, the Drake Passage, which connects the southern tip of South America to Antarctica, suddenly deepened around 35 million years ago, and this led to a total reorganization of ocean circulation. And this change in ocean circulation increased the separation of the Antarctica landmass from South America, which was what led to the formation of the Great Antarctic Circumpolar Current. The current acted as a sort of water barrier by effectively blocking warmer and less salty water from the Central Pacific and North Atlantic from flowing southwards towards the Antarctic landmass. This isolation resulted in a decrease in temperature, which led to the freezing up of the continent. Now, the two theories mentioned could stand alone as the reasons behind the change in the continent, but Musk and some other scientists found a way to link both theories because they believe that was the best way to explain what occurred on the continent. According to them, the deepening of the Drake Passage resulted in a change in ocean circulation. The new pattern, which is similar to those found in the Gulf Stream, directed warm waters northwards to a shift in the ocean currents, which resulted in an increase in rainfall. And since continuous rainfall lowered the carbon dioxide content of the atmosphere, the temperature of the continent began to decline around 35 million years ago. The drop in carbon dioxide levels was due to a process known as silicate weathering. In this process, rocks containing silicate got worn away by the rainfall, and this led to the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere to become trapped in limestone. So the drop in CO2 became so significant that glaciation occurred and the continent became a big blob of ice. This explanation seems very valid because the effect of climate change and changes in the ocean circulation have been noticed quite recently. But this time around, it's reversing what happened 35 million years ago. In the last quarter of 2022, the two polar regions of the Earth experienced unexpected simultaneous heat waves. The temperature of the region reached a never-before-seen height, with the average temperature in Antarctica being 8.6 degrees Fahrenheit or 4.8 degrees Celsius, while that of the Arctic region was 6 Fahrenheit or 3.3 Celsius higher than normal. Another discovery made had to do with the ozone layer. This layer found in Earth's stratosphere protects the Earth from the sun's harmful ultraviolet rays. And on World Ozone Day in 2022, it was discovered that the ozone layer of the Antarctic region had depleted, and the hole was larger than the entire country of the United States. It's important to know that the depletion of the ozone layer can and might lead to global warming, which is an increase in the temperature of the atmosphere. And for Antarctica, this could mean the ice melting completely. Unfortunately, this is already happening. Recently, it was discovered that the world's largest iceberg, known as A76A, broke off from its shelf in Antarctica and started drifting towards the Drake Passage. This ice, which is around 84 miles long and 16 miles wide, will melt along the way, and it could increase the sea level, which could lead to flooding. Although it is interesting to find out that the continent was once a tropical rainforest, and many might agree it would have been a sight to behold, no one wants the ice to melt now because of the drastic effect it would have on humans, not to mention the planet as a whole. So research has been intensified to further understand what led to the complete transformation of the continent, in order to figure out the steps to take to prevent such a huge change from ever happening. But what do you think? Was Antarctica ever a tropical rainforest? And should we let nature run its course, even if it might mean the end of civilization as we know it? And even if we might be to blame for the planet warming? Let us know what you think in the comment section below, and don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to our channel for more content just like this.